click away.
I did not feel like printing out 24 pages.
All right. I would like to call this meeting to order. And the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes. Consider the approval of the minutes from November 22nd, 2021. Do I hear a motion? I assume you've all read them and they seem to be in order.
Oh, that was from the first. Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
All right. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor state aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. All righty. Well. Well.
Well.
So your item 3A is a review of city commission or city board and commission's handbook. The information in here is nothing new to y'all, but we wanted to go over it because since you've all been appointed, this has been created by the city. So any new board members coming on board will get a copy of this and kind of go through some training. So this isn't anything new or changing how you operate. It's just kind of making sure y'all have seen this and reviewed it. So to start off, it lists, of course, your city council members, your administrative staff, and then the general contact info for the city secretary. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Oh, thank you, Brian. Because everybody can read it. I don't want to go through it word for word. But essentially, we have an introduction talking about congratulations on being appointed. We're happy to have you. Thank you for committing your time, things like that. But kind of the main big points of this are your eligibility, your attendance requirement, and selection process up front. So, of course, if you are a eligible voter residing in or working in Nacogdoches City or County, you are qualified to serve on boards. Some boards have different qualifiers, like Hlpc. We lean more towards people that live in historic districts or architects or have a background in preservation, things of that nature. Attendance requirements, you're expected to maintain excellent attendance. We don't have an exact, you have to come to every single meeting or you can only miss this many, but we do ask that you attend as many meetings as possible, just so that way it's not as hard to get a quorum and make sure these meetings can go on as scheduled. Selection process, the city council, y'all all went through the same process where you applied to be on a board. We post when board openings are coming up, and then city council interviews applicants. They also put out agendas saying, here are the people we're interviewing to make sure that everything is very transparent. And everybody abides by the Texas Public Information Act to make sure that these meetings are recorded, they're public, they're open, and people can attend and participate if needed. Under conflict of interest, we do, or excuse me, I'll get to that in a second. So required trainings is Texas Open Meetings Act. You've all been through it. It's the, I think, 1 hour webinar that you read through. You send in your certificate to me and Jan Vinson. Everybody's up to date. We do that just so people understand that here's how open meetings work and how we're being transparent with the public. Ethics, of course, a lot of these are pretty standard as far as you will be service-oriented, you'll attend meetings, you'll be fiscally responsible. The two big ones we point out is board members are expected to act with integrity and moral courage. Decisions must be made with the best interest of the entire city in mind. We put that so Hlpc doesn't say we should spend $10,000 or $10 million on this building downtown, because first of all, you don't have $10 million to give to anybody, but also recommending doing that to one building gives an unfair advantage to somebody else. You know, $10 million could be spent on some other city facility or in some other part of the city or on a different project. So essentially making sure you're making the decisions that benefit the city as a whole and not to one person, one entity, one area of town, and making sure the money that you are kind of overseeing is spent appropriately and not given to just one person or entity. And then, of course, decisions must be impartial and free of any bribes, things like that. So we have had people that have said, you know, I really want to do this to my building downtown. You guys know who I am. We're friends. Like, we all shop at each other's stores. You know, those kind of things should not be taken into account whatsoever when you're making decisions. And these are all things that I know you guys know, but they're written down, so we have to go over them. Conflicts of interest on page 6. This is for people like Carol. I'll use an example. If Carol's applying for a historic restoration grant on one of her properties, she can't take part in the discussion. It's a clear conflict of interest. You have a substantial interest in your homes, in the property that you're administering. So in that case, you would fill out a conflict of interest form, which I have and can bring to the meetings. You fill that out, we file it with the city secretary, and it essentially says, Carol stepped down from the podium, sat with the rest of the audience, and did not take part in the decision to give herself money, essentially. So we want to make sure everybody does that. Some of these things are a judgment call. If you're feeling like you have a conflict of interest, but you may not own 10% of a building or 10% of a business within a 200-foot radius, but it's your mother that owns it or something like that. That's kind of a judgment call. So if you feel it is a conflict of interest, you can still abstain from that. And that's the same process. We just fill out the same form. Even if it doesn't 100% meet these criteria, if you still feel conflicted about your decision and feel like it's something that could be used later, and saying there was an unfair advantage for an application or something like that, you can step away from that. And then if you
Jessica, I want to make one little comment. So it's not something that has come up on this HLPC, but this conflict of interest is for all city boards. And some other boards have felt a conflict if it's a good friend. Well, that's not a conflict of interest. That doesn't qualify for, I just really don't, my friend Bob is making a request for HLPC, and it's a really bad request, and I just don't want to tell my friend Bob no, so I'm going to recuse myself. That doesn't count. Your friend Bob still needs to hear that it's a bad request. So once again, that's not an HLPC. That has not been an HLPC issue in the 18 years I've been here, but it could at some point in the future. And I do know that that has come up in other boards. So friendships don't count. You still have to follow the rules of the particular board that you're serving on.
And then if you flip to page 9, so the rest of this booklet goes over each different committee that this city oversees and appoints. So page 9 has Historic Landmark Preservation Committee. In here it's listed your composition, your terms, your chair and vice chair. So essentially we have 7 members that are appointed to 3-year terms that are staggered. So we're not going to replace the whole committee at once. It is a July appointment board. So we have certain members that come up in July that get replaced. And so we do that every 3 years, or it rotates, but it's a 3-year term. And essentially we have a chair and vice chair, and then the duties and responsibilities are listed here. It's essentially doing what y'all do every time you meet. It's reviewing certificate of appropriateness applications, historic restoration grant funding and administering those, adopting criteria for designation of historic structures, also recommending the city staff to hire a preservationist if you felt that was the appropriate use of some of the monies we have. And then also you can recommend a building be put under historic overlay or should be looked at. Staff cannot recommend that, but the council can. And so this essentially outlines what your duties are. It also outlines when the meetings are. It says we shall meet on the first Monday of each month at 4 p.m. One note, if that first Monday falls on a holiday, then we move to the second Wednesday of the month. And it also gives provisions in here that we can call special meetings if needed. Like we just did November 22nd, y'all's last meeting was a special called meeting to make sure we could get HRG funding approved and taken to city council before the first of the year. So these are regularly stated meetings. We also don't hold a meeting if we don't have any business, because there's no point in dragging everybody into this room to not have anything to talk about, just to have a stated meeting. And so this is what our standard meeting schedule is, but we do deviate here and there. Do y'all have any questions about this?
Any questions?
I know it was very exciting. A lot of
Very
interest.
informative.
So there you go.
You ready, Chairman?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
How many of you are familiar with demolition by neglect as it pertains to the city of Nacogdoches? 1, 2.
I'm familiar. It just doesn't happen very often, does it?
So,
It happens too often, I think.
so we have 2 people who are familiar with it. One who knows what it is but hasn't been around to enforce it, and that's why we're here. That's why I'm bringing this before you today. So demolition by
touching.
neglect. Yes, ma'am, it is.
It is.
Demolition by neglect is an ordinance that we've had on the books for long, before I came here in '03, it was there. So I don't remember what year exactly. In fact, if I just look right here, 1998. 1998 is when the city of Nacogdoches adopted this demolition by neglect ordinance. And in the early 2000s was the first time that we ever used it. And I'll get into what it is in a second, just trying to give you a little bit of the background. As you are all very familiar, Texas is a very strong property rights state, and something like, denying or approving a COA is pretty far out there for some citizens. This is very personal. This goes to another degree. So early on when I came, we had council members and city attorneys that weren't comfortable enforcing this. And so we worked on how do we enforce this. And so the process I'm going to describe to you is that process that we developed then. And we used it very effectively for a number of buildings in town, and then we were told to stop. And we stopped, and now we are bringing it back to you again in hopes of using it again. So we're not creating anything new. This is simply dusting off something that we have, a tool that we have in our toolbox. And before I go to council and say, here's the process that we use, because I don't want to describe a process that we last used in 2010, without coming before you to say, yes, that process we still think is good. Now I can go to council and say, hey, council, here's this process. So in short, demolition by neglect, a lot of people, when I mention that term, they say, oh, why are you demolishing these historic buildings? It's the complete opposite. It is keeping a property owner from neglecting their building to a point where demolition is the only outcome. That's what demolition by neglect is in its essence. So it reads, shall, and this is just part of it. I guess it'd help if I gave you that screen. Shall not permit the property to fall into a serious state of disrepair so as to result in the deterioration of any exterior architectural feature which would, in the judgment of the Historic Landmark Preservation Committee, produce a detrimental effect. So your charge is right there. So it is, in the judgment of Hlpc, would cause the detrimental effect. So the process that we used in the past was, I would reach out to a property owner. So this was Hlpc members or staff, whether it's inspections office, permitting, street department, historic sites department, anyone in that realm could say, hey, historic preservation officer, in this case being Brian, go look at that building over there. I think they have a hole in their roof. And a lot of times these came from code enforcement because they were dealing with other code enforcement issues and would notice something that fell within this criteria right here. So then I would reach out to the property owner, preferably in person, on site, so we could look at it. Sometimes that didn't work out. We have a lot of property owners who live out of town. And so we would then, as our secondary, go to a phone call. So that first contact is simply, hey, property owner, you have a broken window. And describe why a broken window is bad. You leave a broken window open to the elements. Rain gets in, deteriorates the wall, deteriorates the floor, deteriorates the ceiling, whatever interior member, and left long enough, and I see a lot of head shaking, you all get it, so I don't need to describe this in too much detail, but if left for too long, you're in violation of demolition by neglect because you are neglecting that building to a point where demolition is the only outcome. So that initial phone call, meeting, contact, whatever term you want to use, hopefully resolves the issue. And when we were using this successfully, the vast majority of them were fixed with that initial contact. And the only thing that I would do is record that I talked to Bob on this date and this time, here was the conversation, and they said within 1 week they would have a plan to fix it. I follow up in 1 week, 1 month, whatever their term was, but it was 30 days. That was the amount of time that I would give the property owner to start repairing or abating the problem, abating the nuisance. If after that 30 days nothing happened, the letter you have in front of you would be, would be sent to them. And this is just formalizing that conversation. So you can see it has the demolition by neglect ordinance. So according to your records, you're the property owner. This property falls within historic overlay district. Kind of what does that mean? And then at the bottom, this is your initial contact regarding this violation. Please contact the Historic Preservation Officer's office and tell them how you're going to abate this problem. So now there's another 30 days. So this is your first official 30 days. The first one is just a nice kind of trying to be a neighbor because that's really all we want is to fix the problem, not to try to beat someone up. The whole point of this is to save the building, not penalize the property owner. So then after that initial contact letter, We'll say Bob has done nothing, hasn't filed a building permit, hasn't given me plans, hasn't given me a timeline, nothing has happened. Then a letter is sent, it's almost the exact same letter, except it's a certified letter, and it says, this is your notice that this building has been found to be in violation of demolition by neglect. The rest of the letter is almost identical. Then it gives them 30 days. After that 30 days, then the case is brought before you. Because once again, the ordinance says that Hlpc in your judgment must find. So I don't have the authority to say you are in violation. I can say you're in violation, but before a fine is issued, this body must deem that that is a violation. Hlpc then obviously has the authority to say, no, it's not. Historic Preservation Officer, you're crazy, go away. Case stops, or yes, it is indeed a violation. Then the property owner is found to be in violation of that ordinance, and that starts yet another clock. And if at the end of that 30 days, a problem has not been abated, or they haven't started, they haven't filed plans, all of those same things apply, then citations can be issued. I brought my glasses because I thought I'd need to read this since I haven't done it in 12 years, but surprisingly, I actually remember all this stuff. It's kind of, I'm gonna actually skip that page and go to, that's our correspondence record. So we just keep an Excel sheet, but we have it all written down, so, because there's no way I can remember that I talked to you at 11:12 on the
Right.
1st of November. I don't remember those things. But this is our correspondence log.
So that's both pre and post. Like
That's from-
pre, should
that
they
in-
not get to us, and post
Correct.
afterwards
So
as well.
from the very first time that I talked with a property owner about a potential issue, it gets logged to the time that it stopped. Building plans were filed on this date and this time, that stops that case. That doesn't mean we can't pick it back up again, but if we pick it back up again, it starts over. So that's a good point there. I thought I had it up on here, but I don't. But the general penalty in section is, see, it's right here, the violation of any such provision of this code or any such ordinance that governs or regulates fire safety, zoning, or public health, some of these violations are under the public health code, can be punished by a fine not to exceed $2,000. There are other sections that can be punished by a fine not to exceed $500. That is not a historic preservation landmark committee or a historic preservation officer decision, because once, we've run through all of those time clocks, Hlpc has found them to be in violation. They have failed to abate that violation. Then that goes to code enforcement. Code enforcement is the one who actually writes the citation. And the reason why we have it done that way is they're the ones who determine whether it's in the 2,000 category or the 500 category, because they're the code experts. Those of us in this room are not. And then that goes to municipal court. Every day the building is in violation constitutes another fine. Every item that is in violation constitutes an individual fine. So if you have a hole in the roof, a missing door, front door, missing back door, and 2 broken windows, that's 5 citations that can be, not will be, can be issued per day. So that's kind of does anyone have a question about the process? And then I'm going to tell you how we successfully and unsuccessfully used this. Okay.
So I do. So
Yes.
roughly from the time, say, the code enforcer notices something, so roughly 90 days pass before you can do anything else. 30, 30, and 30, if they're
That
not,
is- that is the process we used
okay,
in early 2010.
okay.
That was developed by me doing something similar to what I'm doing today with the Hlpc at that time. And the edict that I was given was, let's not use this as a big club to beat them over the head.
Yeah,
Let's give them several check mark boxes to hit. And if they failed all of them, then hit them.
so in other words, if there were like a broken window or windows or a door, there's nothing anybody can do, right? Until the property owner fixes the problem.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a big question. There's nothing that
Okay.
anybody can do, yes. But we're talking about just Hlpc in this case.
Gotcha,
So
okay,
that's-
okay,
So there are other avenues in other departments of the city.
okay,
I want to just focus us on just Hlpc.
okay, I got you.
So that was the process we used. If just as an example, not a recommendation, just as an example, you could say, you know what, Brian, remove that initial contact, formalizing that, you know, so I talk with you as the property owner, skip that follow-up 30-day letter of, hey, would you please fix this? That next contact could be, hey, I have found you to be in violation. If you don't fix this within the next 30 days, you're going to HLPC. So that's what I'm looking for, recommendations from this group kind of when we end this whole thing. So we use this very successfully on several buildings. One of them, and the biggest one, there's two of them downtown, is Dolly's Diner. That building was in serious state of disrepair. The property owners, the Huya family, they had owned it since the day it was built, really didn't have a clue how bad it was. It was beyond the scope of just our building official and myself going in there, and we could make notes as to what was broken, but we were smart enough to know there was more than we knew. And so we actually wrote a small grant and hired a structural engineer to come in and do an analysis with permission of the owners. We didn't go and break in and do this, to do a structural analysis of the building. And then we took that report and I gave it to the property owners and I said, here's also an estimate for each of these issues. And they said, well, we can't afford that. And I said, I'm sorry, but you have to fix it. So the building's going to fall down, and that's a public health, and that fell into that public health category because it's sitting on the corner, and if the building fell over, it could fall onto Pillar Street or Fredonia Street.
And
Or
the bricks
pecan.
were falling out.
And they were falling out the back, that's
Bricks
right.
were falling out
I
on
forgot
South
about that.
Street.
And so what they ended up deciding was, well, actually they asked, so if I sell the building, does that stop? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And so they decided to list the property for sale, and that was one of those, it stopped. It stopped the clock. They weren't going to be issued citations on a daily basis because they were trying to abate the problem.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they were fixing the glass panes, but they were trying to figure out who can fix it. And then it sold to the Ramshire family, and the Ramshires did this. That's the goal, is to take a building that is about to fall down and save it and have it turned back into a viable structure and put on the tax rolls. Another one was the Old Main Theater. That was in the exact same case. The property, we didn't do a structural analysis because that one was pretty easy. There were a handful of violations, and we gave those to the property owner, and they said, well, I'm not going to fix them. And I said, well, then this is the outcome. We were in the middle of this process, and I said, ultimately, you're going to have these, and I listed them out, these are the violations, and this is what's going to be turned over to municipal court. And they said, okay, we're going to sell it. So they did. And then the building was bought and saved. Now, one that is a lesser degree is there were a number of properties in the Zion Hill Historic District. And this is actually what I think, because I don't know for sure, what caused the directive to stop using demolition by neglect. At the time, all of the properties down there, I shouldn't say that, the majority of the properties down there were owned by two people. It was in a partnership. It was not owned by the five of you tenants, but it was owned by the evil Brian, who was the landlord. And I believe it was viewed that the city was picking on you, the individual tenants, but it wasn't. It was picking on the evil Brian, who was the owner of the structures. But we used it successfully in that we were able to secure, they're no longer secure, but at the time we were able to secure all of the buildings with basically putting an envelope around them. So all openings were sealed, the weather was not entering the structure. Roof was patched, doors were boarded up, windows were boarded up, and so they were sealed from the elements in hopes that they would then be saved without deteriorating further. There are a number of other buildings Jessica and I have been looking over the last couple of weeks, and there are a lot of them that initial phone call fixed the problem, and so there's what's up on the screen, there's the log, but that's really all that we ever got to. We took a couple pictures of a broken window, and then within a couple weeks it was fixed, and so we didn't have to do anything with it. One of the things, that process that I laid for you, talk with them, initial notice, violation letter, found to be in violation. I'm going to need some guidance on that process. And then the other one was something that the Hlpc at the time came up with that was helpful for the code enforcement folks, and this was for residential structures only. This does not count for downtown, because we're commercial districts, residential districts, completely separate beasts, and so we can't keep them in the same category of, well, one size fits all, because it just, it doesn't. What we came up with at the time for the Zion Hill District was, if there was a window that was broken, missing, not sealed, the property owner was allowed to attach plywood that was painted a color to match the structure, and it must be screwed to the structure, not nailed. The same thing for doors. So doors and windows had to have plywood. We didn't get down to the degree of specifying the thickness of the plywood. There's a vacant building ordinance in the city of Corpus, and several have adopted it since then, that specified that it had to be 3/4 inch plywood, not particle board. It must be screwed with 4-inch screws. I mean, they got down to that level of specificity. The HLPC at the time said, let's not go there, just say plywood, painted, screwed, and then shingles must be patched. That was the guidance. And so I was able to take that, write it out on a piece of paper, actually in a memo format, give that to the code enforcement officer. That way then the code enforcement officer didn't have to come back to you to get permission to board up a window.
Right.
Because that's not, you wouldn't approve that as if it came as a COA, I'm assuming. You know, someone says, hey, I don't want this window anymore, I want to slap some plywood over it, and you're gonna say, well, it
Sure,
doesn't
go
really
ahead.
follow the criteria of.
No.
So this is for just vacant structures that are residential in nature. At the time, you can imagine going down Pillar Street, if the back of all of these buildings right here on Pillar Street that face Main, if they were all plywooded up. It's not really appropriate for here. So, Chairman, those are the two things that I'm looking for guidance on is, do you want to proceed with that same criteria for securing residential structures? Temporary, this is not forever and ever, this is so that they can then come up with a plan to fix the building, but in the meantime, let's seal it up so the rain doesn't get in there and birds don't get in there and homeless people don't, you know. There's a house right over here on Durst that we had a cold snap a couple weeks back, and there were some homeless people who, the building was not secured, they came in, started a fire for warmth, fell asleep, and the building caught on fire. Well, you can't save that building, it's gone now. Going back to the demolition by neglect, that's what we're trying to avoid, we're trying to save the structure.
So does this apply like to the Story Right building, which has no roof on it, or the one across from Cole that has no roof on it?
Demolition by neglect applies to all. Now, I'll tell you,
So that's a commercial district, so that's the same?
yes, and I'm sorry if I was a little confusing on there. That was the temporary fixing that I was referring to for residential, which is the plywood and the replacing of shingles. That would be we're not gonna file a demolition by neglect until they can come up with a plan to fix them. That's for the residential structure,
Is-
unoccupied residential structure.
Is there a plan in place for those? I'm just curious.
For which ones, ma'am, I'm sorry?
For both of those buildings.
So I was gonna reference the Wyatt's building or Story Right building. They are slowly working on that building, so
Right, I
this,
knew that.
I would not be able to go in and enforce demolition by neglect because there is someone who is trying to rectify the problem. But if nobody was working and there wasn't a plan, yes, it would fall under violation of demolition by neglect.
So is there a time limit? How long, because they've been working on that building for the time I've been here, almost
One right
20
across
years.
from Cole, it doesn't have a floor, does it?
No.
Sloan's building?
And no
I was trying to
roof.
figure out which one, I was like, I don't know which one that is. Yes, that one actually is because we are trying to help the property owner figure out a problem
Oh, good.
long-term. Because he's the one who came before you, several months back and had a proposal that y'all said, not quite, you're close, but not quite, go back.
All right.
So he is not,
gonna be a
not working
grocery
today, but he is
No,
trying to
something.
do something with that building, so I would not pursue that one
Right.
today. Had the property owner not been trying to do something, absolutely yes, I would start the demolition by neglect process with them.
I'm just curious if there's a time limit on this. Like, can I just do it over the course of 10 years and just work on it a little bit at a time, or do you
That
have?
would be for HLPC to determine.
Okay.
Okay.
I think the one we confused, sorry. I think we confused a little bit which building you were talking about. Were you talking about the one at Main and Church? Okay,
Right.
we talked about the wrong, sorry, we referenced the wrong one. We're not talking about John Sloan's one. She's talking about the,
This is the
Main.
one on the
At one
corner
time
of
it was a
Church.
McLean's clothing
Yes.
store years ago.
yes, at the corner of Church and
It
Main.
has the missing windows on the second floor.
Yes.
Yes. Clear violation.
And is there any help, I mean, are there any plans to save that? Do you know? Do you know of any?
Yes, I do know, and no, there are no formal plans yet, so I would find that to be in violation.
Wow, yeah.
I've had discussions with the property owner, but there's no progress.
So you have in effect done step one, talked
Yes.
with the owner, and there is a case file for it,
There would be if we were allowed,
if we are allowed to go
Yes.
forward. Okay.
if HLPC says, yes, we want to use something that's on our books, go forward, I present to council, council says, yes, go forward, then yes, I would. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I have a weird question. So if you're, it's in terms of residential, if this demolition by neglect is in place, would the real estate people, or should it not be disclosed to buyers?
Oh,
Do they know about it? I mean, are
Oh,
they, is that
surely they'd
disclosed
have
at the
to,
time
wouldn't
they're
they?
buying their house? That we have an ordinance in the city of Nacogdoches that.
We
your house
worked,
could-
when we were doing this was the last time we worked very closely with all of the realty companies. And between Jessica and I, we visited like in-house with all of them.
Okay, you made me happy, answered my question, thank you.
and I have a question. There's a house in my neighborhood, and I'm talking about Virginia Avenue area. And the couple is elderly and, I don't think in very good health. And, I have a neighbor who keeps bugging me, you need to get someone to send them a letter and everything. And what do you do in a case like that when I think maybe even one of them might have Alzheimer's and the house has tarps on it? You know where I'm talking about.
across the street from Dr. Banks.
That was the last property that we started pursuing demolition by neglect on when we were stopped.
Oh.
So I know which one you're talking about very well.
House is
Yeah.
gone
I mean,
down.
it's a sad situation, but I don't know if they're capable of, correcting it. But then I think they may have grown children, so surely
But that's also
someone
not,
should step in. Now, I know that's not any of our business, we just want to have it
because it was the
saved.
same, not exact same, but similar scenario to the Huya building. The family that owned it was not financially capable of fixing
Right.
it.
Right,
But that's not really our concern. Our concern is not the property owners,
right.
but the building itself.
And you
Because the
can't
target
really
of this is the building.
encourage them to sell. I mean, no.
No, in both cases where the property sold, they asked, if I sell this, does this stop? Yes, it does.
Does it transfer to the new owner?
No, but we visit with the new owner the day they take over.
What is the point of this? Is it to get rid of aging buildings or
No.
to maintain safety?
Save the
Isn't it
building.
used
It's to
sometimes
preserve the
by
historic
absent
building.
absent property owners when they want the property, they want the lot, and they will neglect the building so that it does get torn down and then, they can build a Safeway or something there. Safeway, whatever, you know what I mean?
That's what it's like.
Not here. And I only speak to Nacogdoches, not here. So I am not aware of anyone who has purposely bought a building and then.
Oh, I'm not pointing
and then
fingers
neglected
at
it.
anyone, I'm just,
So that it does fall
I've
into
just
state of
heard
disrepair.
that can be a way that people, unscrupulous people might take it out.
See, the way I approach this is a way for us to ensure whether intentionally, which hopefully hasn't been happening, or unintentionally through absenteeism or just poor time management of fixing things, that we can help ensure historic buildings are protected and ensure that they remain. That's and that's what I want to see is I don't want, for whatever reason, the buildings to get to the point that they have to be torn
Right.
down due to real public health concerns. But if we can prevent that through this, which is what happened with Dolly's Diner, it truly was I mean, you couldn't walk on the street because bricks were falling out.
Right.
So to me, this is a way to preserve historic buildings. That's us, that's our part of it. And I would hope that we can prevent the people with bigger sticks in the city, code enforcement, from tearing it down or ordering that.
And that's
That
exactly.
we step in early.
Right, so in the code enforcement world, if the building is unsafe, their option is ordering the demolition.
Yes.
This body is trying to not get to demolition.
And I like
And
this,
this ordinance helps us stop the
that we're gonna
demolition.
educate people, because I have a personal story, and this was before I got an overlay on my house. Very young, and we had just bought the property, and it had a garage apartment, and there was a hole in the roof. And I came home one day from teaching school, and there was a condemned sign on it, and it just freaked me out, because we were gonna fix it, and we just hadn't. I was teaching school, I didn't have any money, but anyway, we were so scared that we got someone to come over with a bulldozer, and it cost more to have it bulldozed than to put the roof on it, and I don't have a garage now. So this is good that people are being told, because I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna be arrested or something, so, I hit up my mama for some money, and we had it bulldozed.
You just want to say something?
Well, yeah, so I have a couple questions and follow-ups. So going back to what Brad was mentioning, so Wyatt, story right, whatever you want to call it, next door here. That building has, since the time I've been here in town, it hasn't been unoccupied the whole time, but it has not been loved the whole time. However, if I understand right, it's actually changed ownership as well.
Yes.
So it's not been one owner, unlike that one,
Right.
that was one owner.
Right.
So where is there anywhere in here, if, are we able, if owner A sells said building that's in neglect, are we able, even if owner B says they buy it, and obviously they're informed, there are issues with it, they see the current lists and everything, how soon, if they fail to immediately start, and not just saying I have plans, but to make progress, how fast can this turn in on a new owner? I mean, how fast can this process start up, so that we don't spend 5 years on one owner, 5 on another, and 5 on a third?
A reasonable amount of time is what I used in the past, and that's not a calendar, and that gives a lot of people just kind of the, ooh, I don't like that, but I did not, and this is just me and my approach to this is not a we have to do it this way, this is just how I dealt with it, is not every building is gonna be the same scenario, not every building owner is gonna be the same scenario, and to put a 30, 45, 60-day time limit for a new owner, it just didn't seem the right fit.
Right.
If they were actively pursuing something, is the way I viewed it. So if I'm in regular contact with you as the property owner and I'm getting regular updates and progress reports, then to me, that's active.
Right.
If it takes you 90 days, that's fine. If it turns into 30 days, that's fine. But the moment progress stopped is when I went to this sheet right here and said, I'm logging that progress was stopped on 123 East Main.
Well, wasn't that the problem with the Redland Hotel and the COA and the grant thing, was they weren't giving us any progress reports? So I guess, progress reports are needed for more than,
And one of the, I'm sorry,
No,
Dr.
go
Beisel,
ahead.
I realized that one of the, I skipped over the form in I should have followed my notes instead of just speaking off the cuff, but this is a report that you see on your screen that is sent to them. And so it's not just me saying, hey, here are your 5 violations, they're actually marked, and we include pictures when we send them to them.
my house is in violation of a couple of these.
And so,
Please
so
don't
we
tear
go,
me
we
down.
go, we go through and check off the violations and include photographs so that there's no doubt as to what a watertight roof is. Well, when I can look up and I see a hole in it and I take a picture and goes, this is what I'm talking about. And this is just a shorter version of the building inspection form that the code enforcement office uses. There's a lot of interior elements that I excluded from here because, well, we look at it from the outside. So it's not that we aren't concerned about proper electrical. we don't have the authority to look at electrical, so it's not even on the form.
What, so it stopped. Why did it come back? I mean, is it just, why is it back? I'm curious. If you stopped it before,
Who stopped it? That might be
that's
a big
personal. We don't
question.
need to
I'm
know
sorry.
that.
Might be city
That
politics.
might be a city politics, I'm sorry.
The reason it's come
It
back.
wasn't HLPC that stopped it.
No.
That is correct, and yes, there was a reason. So, council, a year ago, said, code enforcement is one of our top priorities. This is code enforcement. This is something that can help. There's also been, a lot more interest in preserving what we have. This meets that check mark as well. And so when, staff brought this to the city manager's attention, hey, we have something on the books over here that we can use that kind of fits with what council's saying, go do. He said, yes. I mean, it's on the books, present to HLPC, present to council, and if you're told to proceed, then proceed.
Sorry
So
for
there's
that.
not a specific case. I don't know if that was where you're headed.
No,
There's-
I was just curious
it's
why
something
it was
that-
off and now it's on. Was there a switch and what
And
made turn the switch?
Different council, different city administration, because we have new
That's
city
the answer I
attorney, new
wanted,
city
yeah.
manager, new council. And so
I wanted names.
on the staff,
No kidding.
from a staff side, we've wanted to use this for years because we saw the benefits and we saved buildings and they're now active and people are using them and that's what we want. I heard someone make, I don't know where it was.
Questions,
Okay.
but let,
No, go.
so on this form, I'll start with the form because that's what I'm looking at first. Some of the, and I'm sorry, the hat's coming on. Some of these are positive and some are negative. Is there any way we can make it like on foundation? The first one says structural supports. Can we add unsound structural supports? Because the next thing is foundation cracks and effective waterproofing.
These are more general in nature on purpose.
Okay.
And then we make notes as to
So
what
you
part
make
of.
notes of
Yes.
what, because some of it's like, it's structurally sound, well, on the roof. Well, I'm assuming it's not structurally sound. It's structurally unsound, so I guess my question.
So it's, yes. and
These will be clarified,
Absolutely.
because I don't want them going, well, they checked it, said it was structurally sound, I don't see the problem with the roof.
Anything that is checked means that there's a problem.
Okay, well,
So it's the opposite. It's not checking you're good, it's checking there's a problem.
okay,
So if you had structurally sound under roof, I'm gonna take pictures of the rafters that are broken.
okay,
And you're gonna get a
right,
picture of
right.
that. And so your roof is not structurally sound.
right. Yeah, I'm just, because some things are
So,
positives and
That
some are
church on
negative.
Shawnee, wasn't it a church or was it a house?
Remember that got torn
Oh,
down?
The funeral home.
Doctor's
Funeral
office, then.
That's what it
funeral home.
was, yeah.
That got torn down.
That building should have,
It had vines.
could have come to this years and years ago before Perky and I
Right.
walked through that building. And were a little
walked through
bit
it,
scared
yeah.
walking through that building.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it was long before we were allowed to use demolition by neglect.
Has
That
this
was-
been adjudicated by other cities and other courts?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so you're not doing something new?
Oh,
it's
no,
something
no.
that goes
No,
on.
actually, when we used this in
didn't
2010, we were
reinvent
one of
the
the first
wheel.
in the state.
Okay,
But
Now,
not
lots
in
of
the
cities had it on their ordinance, but everybody was afraid to do it.
yeah.
And we just said, HLPC and city manager and city attorney at the time said, go for it, and we did. And we were successful, and so now other cities, and I kind of look at Dr. Beisel over there, I don't know how many, but I'm aware of other cities having done the same thing.
And blighted cities like Detroit.
Because honestly,
Owners
almost
have used
everything,
that. Oof,
well, not
sad.
almost, everything that we would find as a violation of demolition by neglect is a violation of code enforcement. So once again, this checklist in front of you is the exact same checklist minus interior items that can be found to be a violation under the code enforcement wing of the city. The problem is their outcome is demolition. Our outcome is revitalization.
Right.
So we're heading down the same
That's
path
what-
and then
yeah,
we do this.
Very different.
We
yeah.
have different goals.
And so one of the options, I hope you don't, it is not staff's recommendation, but one of the options is for y'all to say, we don't wanna deal with this. Let code enforcement handle it. You just need to understand then the outcome is demolition.
Oh, no. I'd be giving them a big sledgehammer.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Alamo would make it.
Yeah, sure will. That house has been endangered with plastic walls.
Missing windows, knock that sucker down.
So
Yeah, with all those
you do need a layer of restructuring
Yes.
rather than just tearing down.
Yes.
And more clarifications, so like loose bricks and stone fit under crumbling stucco or mortar on walls and chimneys?
Yes.
Is that where you would put that?
Yeah, so on the case of the Huya building,
Yeah, where it says crumbling of stucco or mortar, you'd put loose bricks or
Yes.
stone? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Okay.
On your letter, on the next to the last line, when you plan, not plain.
Oh, yes, I noticed that. Plain.
interesting that made it through 12 years ago and nobody
Yeah,
caught that.
I know, somebody was
I
sleeping.
caught it.
Yeah, and caught. So then I have one final question, because I know we still have two things to make motion on. You have given us the criteria for vacant residential buildings, correct? It's specifically that, which is the painted plywood screwed in for doors and windows and patch roofing.
Roofing
Roofing.
and siding would be in that same
And
category.
siding.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what we're looking at today. Is there any equivalent that we could see come before us for vacant commercial or not? Or are they too difficult?
You are welcome to give staff directive on something if you want. I feel that it's much easier to simply require the property owner to fix the problem.
To fix the problems for residential, I mean,
For commercial, yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Okay, what is our next step?
So we still need, the things that Dr. Beisel just outlined. If that is acceptable, I mean, this is not we make a motion, this is providing staff guidance. So, if everyone kind of shakes their head and says, yes, that's a good idea, then I just formalize that, and then I'll make that as part of the presentation to council, that here is the outcome for these vacant residential structures, which then abates these violations temporarily. It doesn't mean that we're gonna allow them to sit like that for several years, but that stops the code enforcement wing from saying, hey, this building is too far gone, demolish it, because a year of an open window can cause a lot of damage, especially when the window's already been open for 5 years. So we can kind of stop that and hopefully save that building. And then the other one is, what is the process that you would like for me to follow? So that process, just to quickly go over it again, that we used 12 years ago was contact with the property owner. We give them 30 days. We send an initial letter. We give them 30 days. After 60 days now, nothing has happened. We send them a violation letter, which gives them 30 days.
And this is only historic areas?
Yes, sir, correct. And then after that 30 days, which is now 90 days, they are sent a letter saying your house, your structure has been found to be in violation of demolition by neglect, and a meeting has been scheduled before Hlpc to determine if you're, with a meeting date.
Then how fast does that normally turn? I'm trying to remember what that turnaround. We, like in the past, we met, we said yes, we determined,
Then the next day I issue them a letter.
and so then officially the clock, the fines start ticking? Or does it have to go before council or anybody
No,
else?
it doesn't, because it's a code violation, so there's not an appeals process to council. It would then be me meeting with the code enforcement officers and then them issuing citations.
Okay, so that happens. That's not another 30-day delay at that point.
Hlpc in the past, when we brought those, because very few of them made it to this level of Hlpc meeting, said, you have 30 days to fix this problem, or on the 31st day, you will be issued a citation. So then now you're at 120 days.
Okay. But that's a determination we can make at that time. Okay.
There's been a trend since the new administration took over to take power out of certain departments' hands and make it more streamlined, which maybe is modern or something. But that's been observed by people, and I've been told about it, and I see it's somewhat. This worries me a little bit that they're giving, we're giving rubber stamp approval for them to go out and do things that maybe in the old Nacogdoches, which was more like you are, sort of flexible, and I understand it, these people have Alzheimer's, maybe they can't live up to these 90-day rules. And it seems like it's just giving political cover for them to say, sorry, we have no choice in this, it's 90 days, or get out or sell or do something. And that's not, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not within the spirit of Nacogdoches that I've known. There was always more of a one-on-one personal touch. And that's what concerns me about this kind of thing, is us going absolutely and let's do this, and then other people take the ball and run with it, and it's streamlined a more big city attitude toward things. And I'm not sure it helps us all the time.
Well, Mr. Mull, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this
Okay,
point.
no, that's fine, that's
I
why
think
we're
it's our-
here.
I think it's our first time, actually. So this doesn't streamline, this just formalizes a process that we've used. So the process that I outlined for you is the exact same process that we used 12 years ago. This isn't anything new by any
Okay.
means. And when we say 30 days, that means that they have to do something within that 30 days. That doesn't mean that they have to fix the problem within 30 days. That means that they have 30 days to start addressing the problem.
That could be talking to
So-
a contractor.
Right, this isn't rubber stamping anything, 90 days, 120 days. That's nowhere in this process whatsoever.
Okay.
This is, and I gave the examples at the beginning of my presentation, I should go back and give those again. But if you as the property owner, I contact you, within your 30 days, I say, hey, Mr. Mull, you have 30 days to fix this problem. At some point in that process, if you contact me and said, hey, I'm meeting with my contractor tomorrow, could you come over and meet with me? Great, progress.
What if I call you and I say, I have dementia, and I'm 72 years old? What do you say?
Haven't had that one.
I don't have any money to do this. I've never had a contractor. I've lived here 72 years. What do I do? What would you say?
So there are groups within the city that help people in your scenario.
So there is a back door to this. There's a way out of it if they,
Because once again,
and I know, I'm not saying that about
I
you.
know, oh, yes or no, I completely understand. But I'm saying my approach to this is not the property owner. There is no way to make it a neutral property owner scenario because we all have personalities.
Yeah.
We can't get away from that. But it's to save the building. So if Habitat for Humanities can assist you who have dementia fix your house, that's my goal.
Would you call them for that person?
Oh, absolutely. Because once again,
that would
the
be
point
great.
of
Yeah.
this, the
Yeah,
point of,
that
the
would be
whole
good.
point of this is not to hurt someone, it's
Right.
to save the building.
Right.
And if we can save the building, we met our goal. And so that's why I said I disagree, because it's not rubber stamping it's simply formalizing, yes, Historic Preservation Officer, we as an HLPC would like for you to follow this criteria. Now, y'all have to understand that within that criteria, you're giving us the leeway to not say 31 days, move to the next step. Because we want to encourage the people to make progress. The Story Right building, they've been slowly working on that building for a long time. But they're making progress. And so I would not bring that one to
Right,
you
right.
to say, hey, they're in violation, let's go get them, they're not moving fast enough. Because once again, we all know who owns it, but say, I don't know if they have the financial means to go in and hire a crew of 100 to fix it at one time. That's not really what we're looking at. We're looking at progress towards saving the building. Does that ease a little bit of your concern?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say you're wrong or I disagree. I'm just wanting to understand,
And that's a
because
very
I know people talk to me and there's a lot of general perception of we're just moving too fast. Everything's moving too fast for a slow 300-year-old town. And sometimes you get put on a board and people are like, what's the hurry, Batman? And I'm just here to say, what's the hurry?
I think To give you a sense, because I sat through both of the three, the Dolly's Diner, the Main Street Theater, and then the houses in Zion Hill. Those are the only ones that really got to
Those are the only ones that made it to this.
made it to here.
Yeah.
I don't know, it'd be nice if you all could give us numbers on how many haven't made it here, while you're allowed to work through that process, maybe at another meeting.
There was at least 10.
Okay, so, but those, it wasn't 120 days. There were so many, like, leeways in between, like they said they were gonna start something, and they got extra time, and then then it all stopped again, and then they said they were gonna do something. So like, these drug on much longer than 120
Right.
days, because I can guarantee you, I didn't want to be responsible for pushing anybody out or enforcing. So they weren't, because I remember, they, especially the Dolly Diner
That
building,
one-
it was
They-
much longer than 120.
And that's
Because
just
they had
100,
to have
and
some
that was
delays,
120
yeah.
days to start fixing the problem.
Right.
That's not
And there was a
to
lot to
abate
fix.
the problem completely.
Oh, and yeah, the construction was a whole nother year, I mean,
another
that was a
story.
whole nother year. So I mean, I understand that it's, the way that this is, I have felt comfortable with in the past, is the buildings, by the time they came to us, were in such dire straits
Right.
that I could see they would go. And my job on this committee is for the buildings. I'm a CASA, truly the CASA, not the children. But no offense to the kids, but I'm really the CASA, the house. Now, so it,
Hard-hearted.
yeah, I know. But it was very slow, and then the moment anything happened, it basically all restarted, the clocks restart again, so it was very slow.
Yeah.
It's not, in the past, the very few times it actually made it there, wasn't fast. I think I would feel comfortable, you could tell anybody, Perky said when she went through this, it was very slow. And we don't see most of them that come before us. Well, they don't get to us
Right.
because they got a solution.
It's solved with a phone call or a visit on the front porch, and
Yeah.
they just went, "Oh, I didn't realize it." Oh, yeah.
Do you think there will be more now that this happens, or the same amount?
There will be more initially, just like there was initially when we started, and then very few of them after that initial group is fixed. Then there's only as one happens. So
Yeah.
we don't. I don't have the ability
So
to
is there a
say,
list now, and like, ooh, when we
I
get this
haven't made a
passed, you
list.
can, okay.
but we don't have the ability to say we're only going to target downtown, or we're only going to target Virginia Avenue, or it's all or none, you know. And so if you think about 5 districts, that's a lot of properties. You know, there's 380 plus properties.
I hate that people still have the conception that, you know, why don't you people save the houses that have been torn down, you know, like the city has come in, and, you know, and if there's no overlay, we can't do anything. And like all
this
the
allows us
houses
to
on
save
North
them.
Street.
Right, and this allows us to save them.
Yes, yes. And the houses that left North Street left because their owners sold them. So,
I do have one question. I know of in other towns, I have to look it up, the town I grew up in, went to high school in. They had, going back to a question about 70-year-old person without financial resources. For houses in their historic districts, they actually had a fund to help, and it was residential.
good.
Residential, I don't know how they described it, but owners who were fiscally unable to make the securing of their home, if they were in the historic district. And I know because I had a dear friend of mine that had to take care of that, that had to utilize that program, and she loved the fact that it was there. So I know that means money, but
But we already have that in place.
but we have that in place, and so there was and it wasn't much. It was Lee Summit, Missouri, is the town that had it, And so they had a fund, and it was specifically for the exterior stabilization, and I think it helped her get a new roof. And it wasn't like a rehabilitation tax credit. It was specifically for things that needed for safety. But they would obviously still meet whatever the historic preservation criteria was.
And there are a number of groups here in town that, not city funding, but do help
Yeah,
with, I mean,
there's a church that I knew of someone's house that,
me and my names, and some of y'all that know me really well know that I'm horrible with names, and so I'm not gonna be able to pull them out because my brain just doesn't work that way, but I can describe to you who they are, and what they do and where they work, but, I mean, there's 3 different groups right off the bat
Loving
that
and
I,
stuff like that.
the one that, what's the one with the city team we went and helped? We redid the house over by, Middletown? Mission Nac is one of them. See, I can tell you where I did the work, but I don't know the name of the group. But there are several groups in town. There's also several volunteer groups at SFA. You know, the big
Big
event. See,
yeah.
the big event is another one. So there are a number of avenues for people to get assistance that is not coming to the city to ask for money, but the citizens helping the citizen get the work done.
So I guess we just need to make sure we're on the big event list, so.
So staff is looking for your guidance on
Okay.
how to proceed.
oh, how shall we proceed? I'm looking at you, Perky.
Well, I'm, obviously it's clear, I'm comfortable with the current criteria for vacant residential buildings. And I'm comfortable with this process
That we used
that
previously.
we've used in the past, and knowing that processes can change if we need to.
Yeah, and it looks fairly well thought out.
Yes.
I mean, you know, it's,
Because the only thing that the ordinance tells us, and is that these are the items that can be found to be in violation of demolition by neglect, but does not tell us, here's how you go enforce it. So that process that I outlined is that process that we developed to get the buildings in compliance. So previous HLPC really wanted, let's give them a chance. Let's try to work through this and not just, oh, here's your citation, have fun.
Could I think it would be really nice is if in the event that we do, say someone's close to getting a citation, that we can sort of get these programs that can offer assistance sort of lined up for them, or at least, I don't know, some way that we could give them a list of people to call, or maybe even I would be willing to make a call.
Well, and
Something like that could help, like the woman that lives across the street from Dr. Baker. So that's been an issue for years.
And
To
that would,
assist them.
and that would be on the onus of staff to provide that before they ever come to you.
Oh, good.
So if a
Okay.
case
So
came,
that would
Good,
happen.
good.
Well, I feel very
Yes.
comfortable
Yeah.
that would happen.
Yeah,
That's
sounds
great.
good.
That's awesome.
you know, an example didn't provide the owner funding,
Uh-huh.
but we, staff, wrote a grant to get an analysis of a building for a private property owner so that we could then say, here's actually the problems. So we literally tried to do everything we can before it gets to you, for y'all to find it to be in violation, to then be issued a citation. And since
so it
I've been
wasn't
here,
y'all's opinion, it was an expert opinion.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
So, I mean, most of the things are pretty easy. If the glass is missing,
yeah.
I think everybody in this room can make
obvious.
pretty
Doors
confident,
off.
your window's open, you gotta fix it, Brad, come on.
Wonder
But-
if we still do-
But I don't know what the extent of the mortar deterioration is and how it affects
Yeah.
the structural integrity of a wall.
Right.
We could all make a guess, but none of us are expert, well, I assume none of us are experts on that part.
Bad.
Dolly's became a very vital business. Is it still historic?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Did they come before you to pass all the
Oh, yes.
In fact,
hoops and hurdles?
they went through, and in fact, I give them credit, cause the stucco on the front, which has brick underneath it, they fully intended to remove that stucco, and it would have looked absolutely spectacular. However, it was gonna destroy the brick if
Yeah,
they did.
it was gonna chunk it
But
out too
they
much.
actually rebuilt the entire top of that building. But they had to show us every single thing they were gonna do, and
They
it was
did a
all from
beautiful
historic
job at the
photographs.
top.
They did a fabulous
So
job.
everything else about HLPC stays the same. So, any of the buildings down here still have to go through that same COA process to get approval. So they can't just say, hey, Brian, I'm gonna do this, and we say, good, go for it. No, hold on, let's go for HLPC, cause I can't tell you to go ahead. In fact, I've had some property owners say, well, I'm gonna do it anyway, and my answer is, you are welcome to proceed, but you also understand that HLPC may tell you to stop and undo the work you've done, so that's your choice. If you decide to proceed without approval, you may have to undo it. And they go, what? Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. But they did try to, that building over there, they tried to remove the stucco, and it wasn't possible. So they rebuilt the stucco. They took off as much as they could without damaging the brick, and then built it back up so that it had some depth, based on photos. And then the clock in the top was also added because that was original to the building when it was built.
Yeah.
When it was a Masonic lodge.
It's actually a square compass first and then a clock afterwards.
That's why I looked at her, because she's gonna correct me. She'll correct me, I know.
Okay, so what do we need to do
Mr.
now?
Chairman, I just need directive from y'all. We've heard from one member
Okay,
that she is comfortable with the process.
are you all comfortable with this process? Yes.
Do we need to make a motion?
Do we need to
vote
make a
on it?
motion and vote, make it official?
What is the agenda item wording?
The agenda item wording is discuss and consider procedures for enforcing
Okay, we've
demolition by
discussed it,
negligence.
we've considered it, and we deem it appropriate.
Yeah, you have to,
Hold on.
Oh, wait a minute.
Stop
Hold on
the
there, Chairman.
presses.
so the process, now that we've kind of wrapped this back around, the process, and Dr. Beisel, please stop me if I'm wrong here, is that you are comfortable with is staff making that initial contact. Then after that, making a formal letter saying, hey, you're in violation, and reference that initial contact. That gives them 30 days. And then if nothing has happened, no progress has started, then they are sent a violation letter telling them that HLPC has a meeting set to hear the case. Then we have the meeting and HLPC issues their findings.
So they don't come to us first.
No,
You go through
No.
this whole process.
So it's staff trying to get the problem fixed before you.
it has to come to us.
I mean, it would be great if we do this and not a single case comes to you.
Right.
Because, as Dr. Beisel was mentioning, there were only 3 of them that made it here, and all the rest of them we fixed long before it got to a formal violation.
So just being devil's advocate here, is there an appeal process if they get it? His staff takes it here and they go, we've done this, this, and this. And then you guys go, hey, we don't really buy this and we don't want to do it. What do they do
All
then?
outcomes of HLPC can be appealed to city council. It's the same with any board in the city, except for those that are advisory in nature because they can't make findings anyway. So the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board doesn't have the ability to tell someone they can or can't do something because they're advisory in nature. So there's only a couple of groups like you: Planning and Zoning, Zoning Board of Adjustments, Construction Board of Appeals, and HLPC. I think. Don't quote me on that. There may be a 5th, but those are the 4 that I'm aware of that actually have judicial authority. But there's an appeals process for all of those.
Could we add, okay, well, no, I won't mess with the waters. I'll ask when I'm done, because it really doesn't matter with this.
So Chairman, I was just summarizing the process we used that Dr. Beisel
Yes.
was okay with, so we just
And-
then would need more open discussion or a motion.
Oh,
to
we do
proceed.
need a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a motion to approve Dr. Beisel's suggestions and going with what Brian has explained to us?
I so move.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I second it.
All in favor state aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? All righty. See, I told you it'd be approved.
So my thing, just for us to get a feel, And would we be able to get, we don't have, I'm not saying we have to have the exact properties, but a count of, hey, in the last time since NHLPC has met, we have started, what did you call that thing? The log or whatever.
Oh, yes,
I'm
ma'am.
not looking at it. We've started a
Correspondence record.
correspondence record on 5 properties and they've all been resolved. I mean, would, you know, in the time, you know, just so we kind of know what's happening. I mean, just like all the, staff-approved COAs, we don't see them, but it'd be nice to have that kind of a number.
You read my mind, because we could do it just like what we used to do on the staff-approved COAs, and what Dr. Biles was referring to was, if there was something that, a re-roof of a property with the same type of roof, it doesn't need to come to you,
Right.
it's a maintenance, but we would go ahead and give them a COA, case number, and an approval letter, because a lot of times the property owners just wanted something to make sure, and so, why not? I mean, our view was, well, why not? Let's give it to them. So those were all the staff-approved COAs that she was referring to.
So I guess so my question is, would staff be able to provide us with just a running total, you know, in the month of March? Maybe how many got closed or whatever, but, you know, we have 10 open and 5 of them got fixed.
Absolutely.
And then we'd have a sense of how the process is working or not before coming to us.
And I think initially it would be something like, we have started X number of DBN cases. Because there's gonna be,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm saying, when you're asking how many, I don't know whether it's 10, 20, or 5, I mean, but there will be a lot more when if council says go forward, in the initial tranche than there will be a year from now. Because nobody's done anything about them
In
for
12
10
years, so, yeah. Time does
I know
not
that there
stand
are-
still.
I know there are quite a few down in the Zion Hill district that
That's where
automatically fall into this category.
yeah. Those are the ones I've seen lately that are just really.
And almost all of those are still owned by the same person that we addressed this with the last time. So it's not the people living in them, it's the person who owns them. And that's where all the correspondence goes. It does not go to you as a tenant, it goes to the owner. And that's where our correspondence is.
Do the tenants get penalized by this? Do they end up getting kicked out or, or,
From us, no.
right?
So I mean, you know, if you have a evil-minded landlord, possibly, but not.
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, never mind. It's just politically, it comes back on you guys, like, all of a sudden people are getting these notices and, you know, there may be some real poor people that are.
Right.
But those aren't the people that we're sending the notices to.
Right, I get it,
Right.
but I'm curious how the winds will blow on all this.
The owner's the one
I
throwing
would-
away the notices.
And this is looking at a crystal ball, not based on anything other than the property owner in this case. They do not want to kick out the tenants because then they lose the income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brian, I have another, is any idea about how many homes were demolished by zoning and, not zoning, code enforcement without this taking place?
Oh, Dr. Beisel, top of my head, I can think of 2 in the Zion Hill district and then the funeral home on Shawnee.
Yeah,
So they were demolished because we weren't doing this?
Because
yeah.
and this was,
That says a lot to me.
I mean, this was a long time ago.
Well, I mean,
There
I
may
think,
be one I'm missing, but
well.
there were 2 houses in the Zion Hill district on the corner of Richardson and Bodark. And then that funeral home.
The funeral home was a bit of an odd duck, because the owners actually did want to, by the time the owners who wanted to do something with it got a hold of it, it was in.
It was bad.
Right.
It was in, I mean,
It was
a
bad.
multi-million-dollar project. So that's a bit different.
Right.
And they truly were trying to figure everything out.
And then they just realized that it couldn't.
Yeah.
Anything can be saved. So,
With enough
yes,
money.
but this was not feasible to save.
Yeah.
But the question is, how many, not necessarily since this got passed in 1998, but how many prior to this were also torn down, commercial buildings or residential before we even had this?
Where the
would
Pocket
be-
Park was
Pocket
one.
The
Park as an
pocket park,
example.
yeah, that's,
And that was
A
long
sad
before this
example.
ordinance was in place, but the movie theater that was there was vacant and neglected and it had to be torn down.
It'd be interesting to see since it was.
Is it owned by the city?
No, sir.
no.
The Pocket Park belongs to the same, to the Wedemark building. I mean, there's two separate lots, but it's a package deal. You buy this one, you get this one.
Are they for sale?
No.
Oh,
In fact, they're quite actively working.
Yeah.
And that's a property that I could have used as an example.
Where is the
In fact,
pocket
that is
park?
a, si-
Next
it's
to
right here on the
where
corner. It's right next to the corner lot where
Oh,
the
yeah,
Wedemark Bank
okay.
building, two-story, right across from the,
pocket park is such a euphemism.
that was one that the previous, two previous owners,
We wanted it
not
that way.
current, not the one who just sold it, but the OG back in the day. Demolition by neglect was filed on that property owner, and they replaced all the windows and doors because that was the violation. Now, they didn't maintain them, so they rotted again, and the current property owner is having to replace all of them, but had we been able to use this ordinance at the time, we could have stopped that deterioration by requiring that they be repainted. And then that would have stopped the violation. And then the windows would still be there, and the current property owner wouldn't have to spend $120,000 to replace them. Is that the right number?
125 for windows and doors and transoms, just to start.
So if you had to tear down the Story Right building because of, you don't want to, okay. I'm just like, if that happened, could they replace it with a modern
If you
ugly
approved it.
building?
If you approved it.
The second floor on the inside's looking good.
It would have to follow design, frankly.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying, is only if you approved it would they be able to build something modern. And so that's,
Okay.
that goes back to, this is only one piece of the preservation ordinance. It changes nothing else about the way you've operated. So any change to the exterior of a building requires a certificate of appropriateness. With the exception, as y'all have given that permission tonight, for vacant residential buildings to be boarded up until they can be fixed. Now, there's not a timeline on that, and hopefully that doesn't give you all heartburn, but, I knew someone would. So,
But that's the
that's the
socially
given, I
nice
mean,
person
but that's the
holding
given,
me back.
right, that's the give and take of this process.
That's me. I'm putting the reins on
And
you.
5 years later, Brad, 10 years later,
I'll be
Yeah,
dead.
in 10 years, that plywood starts looking pretty bad.
Somebody has to speak up for the poor people, having been a poor person, so.
So that is the exception that would not follow the COA, is that you have said, yes, you can install plywood, of course, with the price of plywood today,
Yeah, it's a little expensive.
but, you
Brick
know,
is cheaper.
but it has to be sealed. Because, once again, we want to stop the deterioration while we can work with the property owner to properly fix the windows, the doors, the roof, the siding.
How's the parsonage down there doing?
720 Bodart?
The parsonage behind the church?
Playhouse.
Cause the last time I was there, it didn't have a roof or windows or,
It's not a
He's
parsonage,
working
that's
on
why
it.
I was,
oh,
We
okay.
don't care.
so,
Okay.
so Brad, the actual parsonage is across the street on Lenana.
Oh,
720
okay.
Bodark is not the parsonage.
Oh,
So there's two separate, that's why I was like, well, it depends on which,
yeah,
it was never a parsonage,
Really?
no.
it
It
just
was-
looks like the parsonage.
It was never a parsonage, it was owned and occupied by a person who was an elder, a deacon, excuse me, of the church. In one census, the traveling minister resided at 720 Bodark. That does not mean that they lived there,
Oh,
just like
okay.
Sam Houston resided with Adolphus Stern.
Oh,
That
now
does not
don't
mean-
go there.
That does not mean that he lived with Adolphus Stern. That simply means that he stayed.
Right.
He's
But
right there.
the Zion Hill Baptist Church still owns the property across the street on Lenana and is listed as the parsonage for the Zion Hill Baptist Church.
Is that being renovated?
It's
No.
well
It's-
cared for and loved.
Okay.
And we have, Chairman, I'm sorry, we're starting to deviate.
Yeah,
from
we
this
are.
demolition
It's my
matter.
fault.
I'm sorry, this is interesting.
But Brad, you know, right there across from Walgreens, where they tore down the very decrepit old laundromat and finally started doing something, I noticed that there were people living in those two houses that were next door. I noticed about 2 weeks ago that they were moving out.
Yeah.
And today,
There's
all
a
they are
pile.
is just a pile of lumber. So
It's a
apparently
pile
those
of
people that
lumber.
were renting that property were
that's-
told, I know, it's
But I'm
not
sorry,
beneath
that's-
our
that is-
purview, but yeah, landlords will go, okay, you're out of here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
definitely.
not speculate about
Yes,
properties
yes,
outside of
yes.
Well, I know,
HLPC's
it-
purview,
yes.
so.
And it's a shame. It's a shame that we can't overlay a whole bunch of
The
things, but
positive,
anyway.
the positive is with, your blessing to proceed, that's one step closer to us being able to once again use demolition by neglect to see a positive outcome of saving our buildings in the 5 historic districts.
Yeah.
And that's all that really
That's
boils
what-
down to.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Chairman, that is the last item on the agenda.
All right. Then we are adjourned. Thank you all for your insightful comments and knowledge.
Thank you for